They say he hasn't heard a sound since he was 5. No bird song, no laughter, not even the whine of the chisel against wood. And yet, every morning, exactly at sunrise, Ong Tin, known to most as the deaf carver of Vaida, would sharpen his blade with a rhythm so precise, so full of grace, it made passers-by stop and listen. He didn't speak much, only signed. His hands moved like water, quick but gentle, the fingers sometimes trembling in midair, not from age, but from emotion. Jonah heard about him from a motorbike driver in Hue. "You want real wood, soul?" the driver said. "Not tourist stuff? Go see Tin." He carved silence. Jonah smiled. "That's exactly what I'm looking for." He found him in a simple house near the perfumed river. No electricity, no TV, only the smell of sandalwood and the slow creak of old wood under bare feet. "Ong tin kong ko biu hien bat nangoki Jonah Jun voi mochiech mayan." He simply nodded and gestured for him to sit. Then, without a word, he began carving. It wasn't a performance. It was a meditation. He didn't sketch. He didn't measure. He ran his fingertips over the grain, closed his eyes, tilted his head, and began to cut. One stroke, two, then a pause. It was like he was listening, but not with his ears. Jonah filmed in awe. The man's face was still, but his hands were telling stories of rivers, of wind through bamboo, of heartbreak and healing, all without a single syllable. Later, a neighbor explained. "He says each piece has its own voice." She signed for Jonah. "His job is not to make something. It's to uncover what the wood has been trying to say all along." If you've ever felt that words weren't enough, that the deepest truths live in quiet places, this story is yours. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and discover what happens when silence begins to speak. That night, Jonah asked to buy a small carving, a bird with wings half open as if just about to take off. Ong Tin handed it over, smiled, and touched his own chest, then pointed at Jonah's. No words, no sound, just a feeling. Jonah noticed it on the third day. A rusted blade, tucked neatly into a lacquered box, hidden beneath bundles of clean rags and old incense wrappers. Unlike the others, this one wasn't sharp. It hadn't been used in years, but it had presence. The handle was worn smooth by decades of use. The metal dulled, but carved with tiny etchings, birds, stars, and a date, 1974. When Jonah asked about it, Ong Tin paused. He didn't smile. He didn't reach for the blade. Instead, he pulled out a photo, faded, torn at the corners. In it, two boys, maybe 15 or 16, sitting by the river holding the same blade between them, laughing. One had wild hair and a playful grin. The other was Ong Tin. Jonah looked at the photo, then at the blade. "Your friend?" he asked, slowly signing what he'd learned. Ong Tin nodded. Then, slowly, deliberately, he signed. "He was my brother in wood. My first sound was his laugh, my last was his goodbye." He reached for the blade, held it gently, then touched it to his forehead as if in prayer. The neighbor watching from the doorway whispered to Jonah, "The boy in the photo, his name was Louie. He died in a flood. They were inseparable. Learned carving together. This was their first blade." Jonah swallowed. "And he's kept it all these years?" She nodded. "He never sharpened it again. Says some tools are meant to rest." That evening, Jonah sat alone by the river holding his camera but not filming. He thought about how many stories had been lost, not because they weren't told, but because no one listened. If you've ever kept something old, not because it was useful, but because it held a voice, this story is yours. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and walk with us through memories carved in silence, love, and the tools we never truly let go of. The next day, Ong Tin gave Jonah a gift. It wasn't a carving. It was a sketch of two birds flying in opposite directions but tied together by a single ribbon of wind. And in the corner, the blade, resting on a stone. She showed up during the hottest week of summer, barefoot, hair tied with red string, a backpack held together with duct tape, and a face that refused to ask for permission. Her name was Mai. She was 18, deaf since birth, and angry, not in a loud way, but in the way her hands moved when she signed. Fast, sharp, like thunder cracking through still air. She didn't bow when she met Ong Tin, didn't wait to be invited. She walked into his yard, placed a small carving on his table, a rough wooden lion with eyes too big, and signed, "I want to learn, but not to make spoons." He studied the lion for a moment, then looked at her and smiled. For the next 2 weeks, she lived in a hammock under his workshop. She was fire where he was water. She carved too fast, sanded too little, got frustrated when things split. Once, she broke a piece of jackfruit wood in half and shouted in sign, "This wood doesn't listen." Ong Tin replied gently, "Maybe it's listening too closely. Maybe you're shouting when you need to sing." She didn't like that. She didn't speak to him for 2 days, but Jonah saw her watching him carve from the doorway, eyes softening, hands twitching with restraint. On the third night, she brought him tea. Didn't say sorry. Didn't have to. The next morning, she began again. Slower. She didn't copy him. She watched him. Then tried to hit a wood the way he did. Not as something to control, but something to follow. One afternoon, Jonah asked her, "Why carving?" She signed without hesitation. "Because when I carve, no one interrupts." He nodded. "And why him?" She paused, then signed, "Because he hears more than anyone I've ever met, even without ears. If you've ever struggled to find a mentor who didn't fix you but saw you, this story is yours." Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and watch how even the loudest storms can learn to listen. That evening, Ong Tin gave her a gift, a small unfinished block of wood with a single cut in it, one that curved like wind bending through a valley. He handed it to her, then signed, "Finish it. Makes the thunder sing." The block was larger than anything Mai had ever touched. A slab of aged sour wood, thick and dark like storm clouds. It had sat in Ong Tin's storage shed for over a decade, untouched, waiting. He pulled it out one morning and motioned to Mai. We carved together. Her eyes widened. "Really?" She signed. He nodded. They brought it out into the courtyard. Jonah set up his camera quietly, senses something important. Mai came with sketches. Bold, sharp lines, waves crashing, birds soaring, a phoenix ripping through clouds. Ong Tin shook his head. He pointed to the grain, the natural curve of the wood, then traced it with his finger, slow and deliberate. He wasn't carving a phoenix, he was carving the wind. She rolled her eyes. "Too quiet," she signed. He smiled. Not quiet, patient. They began. The first day went well. 2 cuts each. The side bold, jagged, the side soft, spiraling. The second day brought tension. Her chisel struck too deep. His response was a long stare. She wanted motion. He wanted stillness. On the third day, she snapped. "You don't trust me. You want to make your peace and just let me help." He didn't argue. He walked away. Jonah turned off the camera. Mai sat alone beside the half-carved slab, fists clenched. But that night, she didn't sleep. She stayed beside the wood, touched every groove, felt every ridge with her fingertips, and slowly, she heard it. Not a storm, not his silence, something in between. The next morning before dawn, she carved, not with fury, with listening, with care. When Ong Tin returned, he paused, saw what she had added, a gust of wind that turned into flame. Both sides meeting at the center, neither dominating. He smiled, then carved beside her. They worked for 3 more days. No signs, no arguments, just rhythm. And when it was done, they stood back. The piece was unlike anything either had done alone. Fire and breath, stillness and power. 2 worlds meeting in one body. If you've ever tried to create something with someone and found that the real masterpiece wasn't the work, but the relationship, this story is yours. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and watch how trust, friction, and art can shape something neither could imagine alone. They titled the piece, Gio Noi. When the wind rises, he arrived in a white SUV, foreign plates, designer sunglasses, the kind of man who didn't belong in a village like Vida. But he had money, and more importantly, he had interest. Jonah introduced him hesitantly. His name's Edward, art dealer, runs a gallery in Singapore. He saw the video. Edward didn't waste time. He walked straight to Gio Noi, still resting beneath a bamboo canopy in the courtyard. He circled it, twice, then said, without looking up, "It speaks. I want it." Mai stood beside the carving, her hands tightening behind her back. "How much?" Jonah asked reluctantly. Edward pulled out a folder. $50,000. Jonah's eyes widened. Mai gasped. Even Ong Tin raised an eyebrow. "But," Edward added, "I have conditions." Everyone went quiet. "I want it signed by the master," he said, pointing to Ong Tin. "Just him. One name. One artist." Mai stepped forward. "We carved it together," she signed firmly. Edward smirked. "But people won't pay 50 grand for a student's name. The market wants legacy. Purity." Jonah translated. Ong Tin said nothing. Edward leaned in. "This piece will go in the front window of our Saigon location. It'll be photographed, reviewed. It'll make headlines." He turned to Mai. "Your time will come. But this is a master's piece. Don't dilute it." The silence was unbearable. Then, slowly, Ong Tin walked to the carving. He placed both hands on it, ran his fingers across the wind, then the flame. Then, without a word, he picked up a small carving knife. Everyone held their breath. He etched 2 initials into the base of the piece. Not one name, 2. T+M. Edward stared. "Just cost yourself." Ong Tin raised a hand. "Firm final." Jonah translated. He said, "You came for the art, but you don't understand the artist." Edward turned, furious. He left without a word. The SUV disappeared into the dust. Mai looked at Ong Tin. Her hands trembled. "Why?" She signed. He smiled. "Tin means faith. But today, it meant father. If you've ever had someone stand up for you, not because you were perfect, but because you mattered, this story is yours." Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and witness how true value is never for sale. That night, they didn't talk about the money. They sat beside Gio Noi drinking tea. The wind picked up, and for the first time, they both laughed. No sound, just joy. It started with a search for sandpaper. Mai opened the wrong drawer. Inside were rolled sketches tied with red thread. Most were old designs. Temple doors, dragon heads, flower motifs. But one stood out. A woman's face. Not detailed, just soft lines. Hair undone. eyes closed, lips slightly parted, as if waiting for something that never came. In the corner, barely visible, Tao, 1980. Mai looked toward Ong Tin, who were carving by the window. She hesitated, then picked up the second item beneath the sketch. A folded envelope. No stamp, no address, just the same name, Tao. She brought them over. He saw the paper and froze. His carving hand stopped midair. Mai didn't sign anything. She just placed both items gently on the table and stepped back. After a long pause, Ong Tin opened the letter. The ink had faded, but the words were clear. You said wood can carry voices. I hope this one reaches you. I still hear your hands in every quiet room. If you ever forgive me or miss me, meet me by the banyan tree on the night of the first spring rain. He didn't cry. He just stared at the words and then smiled. Not a happy smile, a memory. Jonah entered, saw the scene, and waited quietly. After a long time, Ong Tin picked up a blank piece of wood, not to carve, but to write. He traced each letter slowly, using the blade like a pen. Then he passed the piece to Mai. On it was a single sentence. She waited. It didn't come. Mai signed softly. Why? He touched his chest, then his ear, then the carving. He didn't need to explain. Some silences are too deep for timing to fix, but that night, Mai carved something. Alone. A woman beneath a banyan tree. Eyes turned toward the sky. Not sad, not joyful, just waiting. She placed it beside Gionoi without a word. And in the morning, Ong Tin added one small detail. A single drop of rain resting in her open palm. If you've ever held on to a love that never had its moment, but still shaped you deeply, this story is yours. Subscribe to Woodcarving Artist and trace the whispers that remain, even when the voice is gone. They didn't speak of it again, but for the first time, Mai saw him not as a master, but as a man. It came without warning. A thick, steady rain, the kind that blanketed the sky in silence and made the air smell like fresh earth and secrets. Mai was sweeping the courtyard when it began. She paused, then looked toward Ong Tin. He had stopped carving. He sat frozen, staring into the rain like someone remembering a story halfway through. She watched as he stood, walked slowly into his house, and returned with an old umbrella, bamboo handle, cracked fabric. He looked at her, pointed to the horizon, then signed, "Come." No explanation. They walked together, past flooded rice paddies, through muddy alleys, until they reached the edge of the village, where a massive banyan tree stretched its roots into the earth like veins from a forgotten god. Mai had never been here before. Ong Tin stepped beneath the tree's canopy. The rain fell softer here, slower. He touched one of the roots, then turned and sat. She joined him. Minutes passed. They didn't sign, didn't speak. Then, footsteps, software hesitant. From behind the tree came a woman, hair streaked with gray, a thin scarf over her shoulders. She walked as if unsure whether the ground would hold her weight. Her eyes met Ong Tin's. She didn't cry. She just smiled, then lifted her hand and signed a single word. Still, he nodded. Mai sat in silence, breath caught in her chest. She realized she was witnessing something older than pain, older than apology. This was what waiting looked like, fulfilled. They didn't embrace, didn't talk of the years. They just sat as the banyan tree listened. After a while, the woman stood. She placed something in Ong Tin's hand, a small carved pendant, smooth and light. Then she walked away. When she was gone, he showed it to Mai. It was shaped like wind, just like Gionoi, but older, softer, as if carved from memory. He signed, "She never stopped carving either." If you've ever wondered if someone remembers you, even after silence, distance, and time, this story is yours. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and witness how some promises echo louder than words. That night back at the house, Mai found a fresh piece of wood on her table, a note beside it. "Now you carve something for tomorrow." It took her 4 days to find the right wood. She didn't ask Ong Tin, didn't consult Jonah. She walked alone to the forest edge, traced her fingers along trunks and fallen branches until she found it, a curved limb from a guava tree, split but not broken, aged but still fragrant. She carried it back, hugged to her chest like a secret, and she began. Not with sketches, not with certainty, but with listening, the way Ong Tin had taught her. Every groove she carved was a question, every curve a reply. She worked through the night, through rain, through her own doubts. Jonah stayed silent, filming from a distance. Even Ong Tin didn't approach. He simply watched and waited. On the 5th day, she unveiled it. A woman, not young, not old, hair loose, eyes closed, one hand reaching into the earth, the other lifted to the wind. From her fingertips flowed carvings of different kinds. A flower blooming, a child's face, a bird mid-flight, a flame just beginning to rise. On the base, a single word, Ngai Mai, tomorrow. Jonah blinked. "That's your name." She nodded, then signed, "But also what I want to give back." Ong Tin stepped forward. He placed his hand on the carving, then on her shoulder, then nodded. It was the first time Mai had ever seen tears in his eyes. Not sorrow, legacy. Later that week, they placed the piece in the village square next to Gionoi. No plaque, no price, just a note. Have you forgotten how to feel? Come sit beside her. Visitors came, not many, but those who did stayed longer than expected. Some touched the woman's hand, some cried, some simply sat and listened. If you've ever found yourself, not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet space between what is and what could be, this story is yours. Subscribe to Wood Carving Artist and follow how the future is carved. Not from perfection, but from purpose. That night, Mai returned to her hammock. She looked up at the stars, hands still dusted with wood shavings, then signed into the empty sky. "Thank you." Behind her, in the soft glow of lamplight, Ong Tin began to carve once more. But this time, it wasn't carving alone.